إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to our Hadith class where we are going through the 40 Hadiths collected by Imam Nawawy rahimahullah ta'ala. We began with an introduction and we finished the first Hadith. And today inshallah we'll move on to the second Hadith. Now the second Hadith is a little bit longer and it illustrates a concept when it comes to Hadith, actually a few. First of all, it shows us that the Hadith, they have something that is known as Sababul Wurud. Sababul Wurud is similar to Sababul Nuzul when it comes to the Quran, which basically means it has a reason why the Hadith came about. When we speak about the Quran, we say Sababul Nuzul or Asbabul Nuzul, the reason why the revelation was sent down. Because if you look at the Quran, you will find that each ayah, each surah, each chapter and verse, it deals with specific situations. And many of those are things that we derive our own actions and so on from. But when it comes to Hadith, we don't say Sababul Nuzul, we say Sababul Wurud, the reason why this Hadith came about. Because if you think about it, each and every Hadith has a backstory, right? It's not just that the Prophet ﷺ is just standing and talking like that, but he is interacting. So every Hadith has a story behind it. And if you know the story behind the Hadith, then it adds to the beauty of it, and it adds to the person understanding the Hadith in its proper context. Because sometimes the Sababul Wurud adds a layer to the Hadith that helps the scholar, the alim, understand it better. So this Hadith, another thing that it illustrates even before starting it is once we understand the backstory to this Hadith, it will illustrate another point. So the backstory of this Hadith, that is known as Hadith Jibreel, it happened and it is recorded in the books of Hadith, where the scholars in Islam, they say a little while after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, people started innovating things. They started coming with their own understanding of the religion of Islam. And there was a man known by the name of Ma'bad al-Juhani. This man was a man who had done such a thing where the people wanted clarification. They wanted to go to someone that really had the answer. And this was after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, and the ones who understood the religion the best after the Prophet ﷺ were his companions. So two young men sat out on a journey, and they traveled, and then they came to Medina. And they found Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, the son of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, as they were entering the masjid. Either they were entering the masjid or they were leaving the masjid. So they took their opportunity and they asked Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma a few questions, and one of the things that they highlighted, they said, where we come from, and they lived somewhere close to Iraq, they said, where we come from, there's a man by the name of Ma'bad al-Juhani, and this man, he says there's no qadar, that as Muslims we do not believe in qadar. And they wanted, these two men, they said, we want clarification. And Abdullah bin Umar, he said to them, tell that man, ana bari'un min, I am free from him. I do not want to associate myself with that person. Why? Because he has gone against one of the fundamental pillars in the religion. One of the fundamental aspects of the religion, which is وَأَن تُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. This is al-Iman. So what Abdullah bin Umar said, he quoted the whole hadith from the beginning, where we will start, until the end. So it shows us the length of this hadith is a reflection of what Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma did. And it shows that sometimes a scholar might mention just the verse or the hadith, or sometimes they might mention the whole context of said hadith. So this is the backstory that helps us understand this hadith. So Abdullah bin Umar, he said, "An Umar bin al-Khattab," on the authority of Umar bin al-Khattab, who is his father. رضي الله عنه قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم, whilst we were sitting with the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, one day. And notice here how simple Umar bin Khattab puts this, but this one sentence is profound. He says, بينما نحن جلوس, whilst we were sitting one day ذات يوم. And who are they sitting with? They're sitting with the Prophet ﷺ. It shows how these companions utilized their time. And there's even more of a backstory there, where Umar radiallahu anhu would take turns with his neighbor, because at the same time they wanted to benefit from the Prophet ﷺ and the knowledge. They had families and they had to take care of their families. So they came up with a solution. Umar said, one day I will go and gather all the knowledge from the Prophet ﷺ, and during that day you help me with my family, take care of what is needed to be taken care of. And the next day we will swap like that, so that we do not neglect our families, and at the same time we benefit from the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the way that they used to do, and they tried as much as possible to spend their time with the Prophet ﷺ. This is why you will see someone later on, someone like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. People, they ask, they say, how come so many hadiths are narrated by Abu Hurairah, and not that many are from Abu Bakr and Umar, who were always with the Prophet ﷺ? And the scholars have answered that. They say Abu Hurairah, he was with the Prophet ﷺ for 2 years, yet he is known as al-mukthirin min al-hadith, of al-hadith, those who have passed on a lot of hadith. And the answer is simple. The answer is that Abu Hurairah did not have any other responsibility. He was from the Ashab al-Suffah, those people, those companions that were extremely poor. And they would stay inside the masjid, and they would live inside the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ made a place for them inside the masjid. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he has no other responsibility, whereas Abu Bakr, he's a leader, he is a businessman, he has a family, and so on, and all these things. Same thing with Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, that they have these external responsibilities as well, whereas Abu Hurairah, just as an example, he is not like them. So you see here how the Prophet ﷺ, how the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they would sit any moment they would get with the Prophet ﷺ in order to benefit from him. So this is one day they were sitting at the masjid. ذات يوم اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد. So Umar bin Khattab is sitting there, not just himself, but with other companions and the Prophet ﷺ, and he's describing a man who enters upon them, and the way that he is describing him is as if it is an unknown man. This man is unknown, yet the physical, the clothes and his physical appearance shows otherwise. So what does Umar bin Khattab say here? He says, اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب. This man has very white clothes, extremely white clothes. شديد سواد الشعر, yet his hair is extremely dark, black. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر, and you do not see any traces of travel on him. No trace of travel. ولا يعرفه منا أحد, and no one from amongst us knew him. This, in English, they call it an oxymoron. An oxymoron. And what it means is when you have two words that are completely the opposite, or they convey the opposite meanings next to each other. So if you, for example, say the living dead, the living dead. Living is one thing and dead is the complete opposite. So if you have two things, and usually those two things, they do not make sense when you put them together. Because either they're one thing or the other, they cannot be both. So here in this case, this is the way that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ are reacting. Umar is saying, لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد. This man, you cannot see that he traveled, and at the same time no one knows him. He's new to Medina, and Medina back in those days, it was just a small place. It's a small village, a small city. People knew each other. They not only did they know each other, but they knew their fathers and forefathers and so on. So if someone is new to the city, people will recognize them. And the hadith continues, حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, until he sat next to or in front of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه, and he sat with his knees against the knees of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, extended them. Let's pause here. Later on in this hadith, we will find out that this person who is coming is actually an angel, Jibreel alayhi salam to be specific. And everything that Jibreel is doing, it shows that he is familiar with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because a random person doesn't just come and sit in such an intimate way to someone that they do not know. However, usually you'll find in other hadith that those that are not familiar with who the Prophet ﷺ is or was, when they enter the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, they actually have a hard time distinguishing the Prophet ﷺ amongst the other companions. So you will find in other hadith where some of the wufud, some of the delegations, when they would come to Medina and they would enter the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, the first question that they would ask is, Afikum Muhammad, is Muhammad ﷺ amongst you? Because we want to meet him and speak to him. And even then the Prophet ﷺ would be sitting there. What does this show us? It shows us the great humility that the Prophet ﷺ had. We know that Prophet ﷺ is khairu khalqillah, the best of all creation. even better, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the angels themselves. Yet the Prophet ﷺ is sitting amongst his companions. There is no crown on his head. There are no clothes that distinguishes him to show that he's more special, more wealthy, more important than the other companions. He could have been mistaken for Abu Bakr, Umar, anyone else who was there. But here in this hadith, you see the opposite. You see this this man coming straight to the Prophet ﷺ, sitting next to him in a very intimate way. And on top of that, وَوَضَعَ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى فَخِذَيْهِ, he takes it another level. He actually places his hands on the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if you do something like that, that shows that not only are you familiar, but you have this relationship where something like that is normal. وَقَالَ يَا مُحَمَّدْ, and when he addresses the Prophet ﷺ, he is very straight to the point. If this really was a stranger that came from someone else, this is not the way to start a conversation. When you speak to the Prophet ﷺ, you would most likely introduce yourself. You would explain who you are and what purpose you are there. But here, Jibreel alayhi salam, he is going straight to the point, because you have to remember, when Jibreel and the Prophet ﷺ are interacting, it is a teacher interacting with a student. That in this case, and in many other situations, Jibreel was the teacher. He came with the wahi, he came with the revelation, whether it was the Quran or any other thing that was passed on to the Prophet ﷺ. So Jibreel alayhi salam is the teacher, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the student. And he starts by asking, "Akhbirni an Islam, tell me about Islam." And the Prophet ﷺ, he explains, أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. So the Prophet ﷺ, he answers this simple question. Imagine for a moment if someone asked a question that everyone around them knew. Let me give a better example. If a senior man, elderly man, came and asked, "How do I make wudu?" Let's say he is in his 70s, 80s, and he asks in front of the people, "How do I make wudu?" People would be shocked. They would look at him and think, "This man, he is so old, how did he live this whole time without even knowing how to make wudu?" And some people might even laugh, right? And the person who's answering, whether it's the Sheikh, Imam, whoever it is, might say, "You're so old and you don't even know how to make wudu. What about your salah all this time?" What I'm trying to do is to show the contrast between normal human behavior and the behavior of the Prophet ﷺ. Jibreel, or this man, is coming and asking the most simple question. Yet the Prophet ﷺ does not dismiss it. He answers it. And it shows us that in Islam there is no such thing as a dumb or silly question, as long as the person is asking for the right intention. So in the same way that the companions, they do not rebuke this man and say, "You don't even know the arkan of Islam." they respect the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ, and they respect the answer, the question of the person. And also part of respecting the knowledge of the teacher is not to jump before the teacher. Now, Umar bin Khattab is there with the Prophet ﷺ. He knows very well Arkan al-Islam. But yet he has the Prophet ﷺ who is there with him, who has more knowledge. So when the man is asking, he's asking the Prophet ﷺ. So it is not for Umar to jump forward and say, actually I can teach you the Arkan al-Islam. So this interaction, we benefit not only from the knowledge, the words and the things that were said, but we also benefit from just looking at who is talking, who is responding, and the interaction itself. So the Prophet ﷺ answers, and the man, Jibreel, says, "Qala sadaqt, you have spoken the truth." And then Umar makes a note. He says, فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُصَدِّقُهُ. We were shocked, we were amazed that this man is asking questions, and at the same time he's saying that you have spoken the truth. Again, it can't be both. It has to be one or the other. Either this man knows the answers, or he does not know. He cannot ask questions and then say, you have spoken the truth. And he keeps asking, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِيمَانِ. He says, tell me about Iman, faith. Now, the definition of faith itself, the scholars in Islam have said that faith is made up of 5 things. Faith, Iman, is made up of 5 points. It is tasdeequn bil qalb, a belief or certainty in the heart. Wa qawlun bil lisan, and a statement on the tongue. What is that statement? It is La ilaha illallah. Wa amalun bil jawarih, and actions on the limbs. And the two final points is يزيد بالطاعة وينقص بالمعاصي. That Iman, it increases with good deeds and it decreases with bad deeds. These are the 5 things that are important to know when it comes to Iman itself. Okay? Let us repeat them. Tasdeequn bil qalb, certainty, conviction in the heart. Qawlun bil lisan, statement on the tongue, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And amal bil jawarih, actions on the limbs, meaning that a person prays, a person fasts, and so on, and they come with the actions of Islam. And it increases and it decreases. So a person cannot be a Muslim without having these things. Okay? If you just say La ilaha illallah and you don't have it in your heart, what are you then? You are a hypocrite, a munafiq, wal-'iyadu billah. Right? And also the fact that Iman increases and decreases, this is an important point, because many people will say Iman is fixed. If you're a Muslim, you're a Muslim. But that is not true. My Iman is nothing compared to the Iman of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So you see that Iman fluctuates, it moves up and down, and the way that it does so, or the reason why, it is to do with good deeds. This is why in the month of Ramadan that just passed, our Iman is very high, because we do extra things, we fast, we read Quran and so on, and we feel that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once we turn away and we leave that state, then Iman goes down. Okay? And then the Prophet ﷺ, he explained what Iman is, and he put it as 6 points. He said, "An tu'mina billah," to believe in Allah, wa malaikatihi, and in His angels, wa kutubihi, and His books, wa rusulihi, wal yawmil akhir, wa tu'mina bil qadri khayrihi wa sharrihi. Okay, so these 6 points. Believing in Allah is obvious. Believing in the angels. When we believe in the angels, we believe in all of the angels. The scholars in Islam, they used to say, we believe in them ijmalan bil ijmal wa tafsilan bil tafsil, meaning that we believe in them in a general sense. Do we believe that the angels exist? Yes. And tafsil in this case is specific, meaning those that we know specifically, like Jibreel, like Mikael, and so on. And the truth is that no one actually knows, other than Allah, how many angels there are. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُوَ. And no one knows of the force or the army of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala illa hu, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam put it in a beautiful way in a hadith. He said that there is no space in the heavens bigger than the span of 4 fingers, bigger than the span of 4 fingers, except that there is an angel there, except that there is an angel there, either in ruku', either in sujood, or worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So believing in the angels, followed by believing in the books. So as Muslims, we believe in the books that have been mentioned to us. And those are 4 or 5 if you want to be technical. So the most important book is the book, the final revelation, the Quran, also known as Al-Furqan. This is the book that the Prophet ﷺ received. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it to the Prophet ﷺ. But it is not the only book. Along with it, we have the Injil. People sometimes wrongly, they say the Bible, but that is not true. The Bible is made up of many different books. 66, I believe, different books that have been put together. And when we say the Injil, we are not referring to all those different books under the name Bible, but what we are referring to are certain Gospels or parts of it that the Prophet Isa alayhi salam received. Along with that, we have the Torah that was revealed to the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And then we have the Zabur of Dawood alayhi salam, and some scholars would also say the Suhuf of Ibrahim, the scrolls of Ibrahim. So these are the books that we believe in, and we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed them. After that, there's the Rusul, meaning the messengers. Here, the same principle applies, that we as Muslims believe in them in a general sense and specifically. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sums this up very beautifully when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ. And verily indeed we have sent messengers before you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَصَصْنَا عَلَيْكَ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ لَمْ نَقْصُصْ عَلَيْكَ. That some of them we have shared with you their story, we have told you about them, and you know about them by name, and you know their story. But there are others whose story that you are not aware of. So in that case, we say, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets and messengers to all nations. even if we do not know of who those people were, those nations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَإِن مِّنْ أُمَّةٍ إِلَّا خَلَا فِيهَا نَذِيرٌ وَإِن مِّنْ أُمَّةٍ إِلَّا خَلَا فِيهَا نَذِيرٌ. That not a single nation, there is no single nation except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent a nadhir, a warner, a prophet, a messenger to them. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. And in every nation we have sent forth or brought forth a messenger. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made dhulm, transgression, injustice, haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. And we would not punish a group of people, a nation, except that we sent to them a messenger. So this is belief in the messengers, وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, and belief in the last day. And this is actually one thing that separates us from many of the other belief systems, because as Muslims we believe that once we die we are brought forth on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and this is one thing that the kuffar of Quraysh would fight the Prophet ﷺ against. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran, زَعَمَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَلَّا يُبْعَثُوا, that the non-believers, the disbelievers, they wrongfully assume that once that they die, they will not be brought back. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, قُلْ بَلَا وَرَبِّي لَتُبْعَثُنَّ ثُمَّ لَتُنَبَّؤُنَّ بِمَا عَمِلْتُمْ وَذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirms it, so that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam affirms it. So this is a very crucial point when it comes to the arkan al-Iman. And finally, بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ, to believe in fate, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both in good and bad. What is important to note here is that in Islam we do not believe that any of the qadr is bad. It is only our perception. In reality, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees is good. So when we say, or when it is mentioned in the hadith, بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ, some people, they misunderstand this and they think it is the qadr that is the khair and the shar, when in reality, the way that the scholars have explained it, it is our perception of the qadr. So this is an important point to highlight. And the issue with qadr, we've explained it in the past. Some people use the qadr as an excuse, and they'll tell you, well, if everything has been decreed and decided, why should I do what I need to do? And the answer is simple. It all goes back to, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows from His infinite knowledge what you will do, but at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you free will. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you will do does not contradict or does not take away from you your responsibility of what you need to do. And for some people, it is difficult for them to understand this concept, but if you give it some thought, it makes sense. Continuing the hadith, Jibreel, or this man, he continues asking the Prophet ﷺ after again saying sadaqt, and he says, أخبرني عن الإحسان, and tell me about ihsan. What is ihsan? And the Prophet ﷺ, he explains it. Now, ihsan is a higher level than Islam. The scholars, when they explain it, they say Islam is the lowest level. Once a person becomes a Muslim, they entered the fold of Islam. On top of it is the level of Iman, being a mu'min, and on top of that is the level of ihsan. So ihsan is the highest. What is important to understand here is when we say Muslim and mu'min, some people, they get confused and they say, so, I don't need Iman, I'm just on Islam. When we mention each point by itself, if you say Iman, then it means the whole religion, every single aspect of it. If you say Islam, then by itself, then it means the whole religion. If you're speaking about Ihsan by itself, then it is the whole religion. However, once you mention them together, then that is when you start separating them in two different levels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that the A'rab, the Bedouins, they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا, that the A'rab, these Bedouins, they came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they said, we have believed. And by that they did not mean that, you know, we have worked on our Iman and our Iman is strong. No, what they meant was that they've reached a high level, and they, in other words, they wanted to show some kind of favor upon the Prophet ﷺ, that we've reached this level. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet ﷺ, tell them, do not say that, وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا, but say that we have submitted ourselves, meaning you are still in the initial stages of Islam. You became Muslims not too long ago. You still have a lot more to learn about the religion, and so that you move up and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ, he explained this highest level, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, meaning that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you can see Him. The scholars in Islam, they say both these levels is about someone that is extremely mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you know that you are responsible in front of Allah for every single action, every single thing that you do and say, then you will think twice about doing things that do not bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally, this man asks, قَالَ فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ السَّاعَةِ, tell me about the last hour. And the Prophet ﷺ, this shows us that the Prophet ﷺ knows who this person is. He knows that who the person he's talking to is not just any random person. How does it show it? The Prophet ﷺ says, مَا الْمَسْئُولُ عَنْهَا بِأَعْلَمَ مِنَ السَّائِلِ. He's saying that the one that is being asked the question has no more knowledge than the person who is asking this question. And who are the two individuals that are speaking? It is no other than the Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel. If these two do not know when Yawm al-Qiyamah, or the last hour, will be, then no one else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it. And this is something that is mentioned again and again in the Quran, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ أَيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا, and they ask you, when will this last hour be? And a man actually came to the Prophet ﷺ, not in this hadith, but a real man came and he asked the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَتَى السَّاعَةِ, when will the last hour be? And the Prophet ﷺ gave him a very beautiful response, and he said to the man, what have you prepared for it? What have you prepared for Yawm al-Qiyamah? Yani, instead of people asking the same question all the time, when will the last hour be? What we really should be invested in and asking about is asking ourselves, what have we done in terms of good deeds? So Jibreel alayhi salam is asking this question. The Prophet ﷺ basically tells him, I do not know, you do not know, no one knows. And he puts it in a very beautiful way, and this is one of the Jawami' al-Kalim that the Prophet ﷺ he had. He would be able to get across so much information in short words. And then Jibreel, he says, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ أَمَارَاتِهَا, tell me about the signs. What are the signs? And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, أَن تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا, for the slave woman to give birth to her master. And this part is, many scholars have given different interpretations. Some say that this means that things will change within the society to such an extent that it will even affect those that are on the lowest levels of society, like the slave woman in this case, that she ends up giving birth and her own son becomes her master. And there are many different interpretations to what that first one means. وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رعاء الشاء يتطاولون في البنيان. And for you to see, one of the signs is that you will see the naked, the one without shoes, the one that does not have anything. The Prophet ﷺ described these individuals very specifically. He said, Al-Hufa, Al-Ura, Al-Ala, the shoeless, the naked, the one without anything. And then he said, Ru'a Asha, those who have sheep, shepherds. What will they do? What is it about them? يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ, that they will start racing, competing in terms of high buildings. One thing, and inshallah we'll conclude very shortly, one thing when people speak about predictions into the future, one tactic that the Kuhan, those fortune tellers, what they do is they will give you a very vague possibility, right? A very vague scenario. And they will say in the future, or a few years down the line, there's going to be a lot of death. Just that. And definitely there's going to be death in the future. And they keep it open-ended so that when something happens, they can use that and say, didn't I predict that? But the truthful ones, those that have the knowledge, like the Prophet ﷺ, notice how specific and precise the Prophet ﷺ is. He did not just leave it open-ended and say there's going to be big, tall buildings. He did not just say people are going to be rich. He specified that these type of people, those who used to be shepherds yesterday, they will be the ones that are competing with each other. And perhaps this is one of the clearest signs, amongst the clearest signs that we have today. If you look into the Arab world, the same people that the Prophet ﷺ lived amongst, who were shepherds perhaps 50, 100 years ago, if even that, today, if you go on Google and you check the tallest buildings in the world, the majority, if not all of them, will be in the Arab world. So this is something that we can see with our own eyes today. And then the man leaves. قَالَ ثُمَّ انطَلَقَ. He left, departed. فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا, and this is Umar speaking. He says, فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا, and I spent some time. In another hadith, we're told that Umar bin Khattab, once the man stands up and leaves, Umar stands up and follows the man. And he says, the man, when Umar reaches the entrance of the masjid, he says, I looked to my right and I looked to my left, but I could see no one. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. And then it says, فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا, and I spent some time, and in another hadith it explains it. It says 3 days passed. 3 days passed after this incident. And that is when the Prophet ﷺ spoke to him. And he said, ثُمَّ قَالَ لِي, meaning the Prophet ﷺ said to me, يَا عُمَرْ أَتَدْرِي مَنِ السَّائِلِ, O Umar, do you know who the questioner was? قُلْتُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَعْلَمُ. Allah and His Messenger knows best. This is a phrase that the companions often would use even if they knew the answer, because they know from the adab, from the etiquettes of interacting with the Prophet ﷺ is not to be hasty in your response, not just the etiquettes of interacting with the Prophet ﷺ, but with any teacher. So out of respect, they will often say, Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, it's important to highlight that sometimes, some people, they'll use this phrase even today, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, which many of the scholars have mentioned that this phrase, specifically the way it is, was to be used whilst the time that the Prophet ﷺ was alive. Because you're talking about a live person concerning something that they might have knowledge about. But once the Prophet ﷺ dies, then we do not use that term. Instead, we keep it short and we say Allahu A'lam. So there's no need to say Allahu wa Rasuluhu A'lam concerning religious matters. So this is why you will hear the scholars in Islam do not say Allahu wa Rasuluhu A'lam. They will say Allahu A'lam and they will keep it that way. قال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم, and in some narrations أمر دينكم, meaning that this is Jibreel. He has come to you to teach you your religion, or the affairs of your religion. What did Jibreel do? Did he stand up and give a khutbah so everyone could hear? No. The only thing that Jibreel did was ask questions. And yet the Prophet ﷺ said that he came to teach. This shows us that teaching can be in many different ways. And we know from practice that certain people, it helps them to be taught in a certain way. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he would often switch things up. Sometimes he would start with a question and give people a chance to answer. Other times the Prophet ﷺ would literally draw in the sand in front of people. Or if he had an object, he would use it to illustrate the point. So this is the way that the Prophet ﷺ used to do, and this is these questions are questions that everyone benefited from. And the scholars, they say a person is allowed to ask questions based on something that they already know, and they do so to benefit others. So in simple terms, if you know something and you know that the teacher might have overlooked it or forgotten it or something, you can ask as if you do not know the answer. And the intention is not to lie or to pretend in any way, but it's just to show or to give other people a chance to benefit as well. And that sort of practice is taken straight from this hadith of Jibreel. So this is hadith that is known as Hadith Jibreel. It is a little bit longer and we went a little bit beyond the time, but inshallah it is a hadith, if understood properly, not only contains the Arkan al-Iman and Arkan al-Islam and very important parts of the religion, but as you see, it teaches etiquettes. It teaches how a student interacts with the teacher and how to carry oneself if you're both the teacher and the student. So inshallah we'll stop here. If anyone has any questions, we will take questions here and also on Zoom. Jazakumullahu khairan.